Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at a new hook, a special hook, and that is useMemo. Now, useMemo is a special hook and something I would recommend to really learn before you use it and why you should use it in the first place. Alright, so first things first is that if you're using this hook ever, that means you are doing something computationally expensive. If you are not doing something computationally expensive, do not use it. Now, why do I say that? That is because it just adds a little bit of readability complexity to your code. So let's take a quick example, take a quick look of what this is. So I'm going to say const value and useMemo, and I'm going to pass this a function which returns 100 and an empty array. This might look very similar to like use effect, right? You have a function to call, well, you're returning a value, that's the only different part, and you have a sort of a dependency of things. So what happens if I do a value right here? You see, let's see, we have 100 right here, just like you would expect. So what is the difference between this thing right here and let's say value 2, which is just 100? So you might ask me, what is the difference between value 2 and value? Well, technically there is no difference because these both are 100, but what is happening under the hood is that useMemo is going to run this function which returns you 100 only once. That means because there's no dependency of things which are changing, it memoized that value. It remembered that, hey, nothing changed, therefore I do not have to run this function again to extract out that computationally expensive value. You can have a very, very computationally expensive task here, calculating primes or the answer to the universe and everything, and then return a very simple value. And if you do not have a dependency, or maybe like if your dependencies are not changing, this will not be computed again. So to give you an example, let's say I have not really console, but const state set state as use state as 0, and let's say I have I don't know, state variable as state, right? And let's say whenever I click on this, I just set the state to something random. Now the only reason I'm doing this is to trigger a re-render, right? So when you trigger that re-render, let me just go ahead and console log I am inside useMemo, right? So we have a sort of a setup like this. So now if I go ahead and open this, looks like we have an error or something. Use state is not imported. So let's just go ahead and refresh this. And now you can see the state variable is 0. And if I go ahead and open the console here, we should be able to see I am inside useMemo, which is rendered twice. And again, the reason for that is because we probably are inside React strict mode, right? So let's just quickly go ahead and remove this. There we go. And this should drop our rendering problems. So now we should be rendering it just once. Now, when I click on this, you can see that I am inside useMemo is not getting called, right? Because it has memoized that particular value. However, you can see that this value 2, for example, value 2 will be set again, right? So if I have a console log like this, you can see that I can refresh the page and I can start clicking on this, and you can see value 2 will be set again, is happening again and again, right? Now, what if this is just not a number, right? You can also have objects in here, and one of the reasons useMemo is used is that the referential equality here is preserved. You remember that I showed you an example where you can have an object here, const obj, and x is equal to 1, for example, and inside use effect, if you have this obj as the dependency, this will run always. This will always run. Why? Because on a new render or a new cycle render, you can say did obj change. So you can have something like this with an obj. This will always run because objects are compared referentially. That means where they point in memory. And React uses triple equal to, or not really triple equal to, but object.is internally, which is kind of like triple equal to only. And these two objects, the first one in a previous call to this app function and the second one in an updated call, the two objects do not point to the same location in the memory. So that's why this effect runs. So if you go ahead and take a look, refresh this right here. Let's see, use effect is not defined. Let's just go ahead and put that here. And now if we go ahead and refresh this, we're going to be seeing that objects are not valid. All right, let's see. Where did we go wrong? Here, right? So if we go ahead and refresh now, you're going to see we get did the object changed as the log. And whenever I click on this, you can see we are getting did the object change log as well, even though the object is not really changing, right? However, if I do the same thing with useMemo as memoized value, so I can have an obj here and say return count as 100, right? So now I can say obj is like this, and maybe get rid of this, and maybe just say obj.count, right? And get rid of the value 2 as well, and probably get rid of state as well, or maybe not, that's fine, right? So once we do that, once I refresh this, you're gonna see that we get the first did obj change as the console, but never again. Why? Because this count 100, this object is always the same. This is always returned in a same way, right? That means you always point to the same object in the memory. So yeah, I mean, useMemo is used very rarely. I mean, in your React coding experience, in your React career, if you're a React developer, you will not see a lot of places where useMemo will be used. But the places, if you put it in the right places, in the right computationally expensive places, this could be really, really helpful. For example, I can give you one quick example of where I use useMemo is in the calculation of this tree-like structure. Because on CodeDam, what happens is when you are opening this folder or closing this folder, there are certain changes in the tree of the file structure, right? So useMemo is used to save the computation involved in calculating a tree structure, because this component might get re-rendered for some other reasons. For example, you know, some prop gets updated or a WebSocket connection is established or whatever it is, right? I don't really want to compute and recompute the whole tree of the files again and again. So that is why that is inside a useMemo. If you're doing anything simple, you know, which is not so computationally expensive, it's much better than just go ahead and put it directly instead of, like, you know, complicating your code with useMemo. But I just showed you how you can do that, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So one thing you can also do is, for example, if you want your useMemo to, let's say, recompute the stuff whenever state changes, then you can do something like this, right? So now let's say I say that if math.random is greater than 0.5, I want to say math.random. Otherwise, I want to say state itself, right? So what's happening here is that 50% of the time I will trigger a re-render and 50% of times I won't, right? So let's see how that works. So now if I go back, refresh this, and if I click on this, you can see there's no re-render. Click on this again, no re-render. Well, I think I'm clicking on the wrong element. This is h2. Click on this, no, click again. So you can see I'm inside useMemo gets called, because the state changed. If I click on this, no re-render, click on this again, I'm inside useMemo. Why? Because the dependency got changed. Pretty much like how useEffect works. So you can specify the dependencies which are required inside useMemo for computation of the thing. And once the dependencies changes, it's gonna recompute your value and not really compute this function again until one of the dependencies changes. I hope that makes it clear. I hope you understand how useMemo works. Pretty important function if you have, a bunch of prime factorization going on the side here and there. But other than that, if you find yourself using it, try to take a step back and see if this is really required. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna see you in the next one really soon.